Hi guys, I hope you're doing absolutely great so far. In this video, we'll talk about continuation and we'll start off with actually understanding what are their ways to write asynchronous method. We have so far seen the way of writing asynchronous method where we use completion handler, and we have seen the latest way that is using async await. But there are others, that is delegate callbacks, event-based callback. These are the other ways which we use to write the asynchronous method. Now we'll explore this just for the reference. We'll just take a look at them once again, and we'll understand the problem with these legacy APIs. So async await is latest. Other than that, the completion handler, delegate callbacks, these are the way in which we write the asynchronous code. They are called legacy code. It's old code, it's old way of writing the code. And for example, when we use URL session data task is the method which is written using completion handler. In the completion handler, we used to take response error and the data, and that is the asynchronous method. Now we know the latest version of that method is using a async await, and the name of that method is URL session share.data now. And we'll understand the problem with the legacy API, legacy code, the asynchronous method written with completion handler. And what if now that we have the latest way of writing the code, asynchronous code using async await, what happens to those legacy APIs is the point here. So we have, let's say, production code, and we have been using data task, but now we have to use data method, which is the newer version or the latest version of the asynchronous code. So we don't use the legacy API anymore. We use async await now. But the problem with that is we cannot go ahead and create async await version of all the legacy APIs we have. We have thousands of legacy APIs, and we cannot just write the code from scratch, right? So let's understand with the all the ways of writing the code first, and then we'll talk about the problem a bit more into detail. So let's get started. So here I have created a file continuation example. So we have seen, I will just hide this one so that we can focus on this one. So we have here the fetch thumbnail, the same for operation, that is creating the URL, then making the API call, and then data that we receive as a response of the API call, we'll just use it to create the UI image, and then that UI image will be used for the input of the fourth operation, that is to actually create the thumbnail out of it. So when we use the legacy way of writing the asynchronous method, that is using completion handler, and like this, the completion handler, we are, what we do is we just have, this is the first operation where we are preparing the URL, and this is the rest of the three operations happening here, that is and this is basically the second operation, that is making the URL session share dot data task, the legacy way of writing the API call. And second is where we are just making the API call. So we are using the data task, the legacy API, and once we have the response, we have the data response and error. We are checking the error. If it's there, we are calling our completion handler. If we check for the response, if it is 200, we are saying completion handler. When we have the response, the status code as 200, we are good to go ahead and for the further code. And if it's not equals to 200, it means the call was failing or failed. In here, we are checking for the response, the status code. If it's 200, we are good to go ahead with the rest of the code. If it's not okay, then we just call the completion handler and say there is an error. And when we have the data, if it's 200, means we have the data, we check for the data, and we create the image out of it, which is the third operation. And we just return the error in case we do not have the data. And the fourth one is on the main queue, we are calling the completion handler to return the image out of it, which is the fourth operation, which is the third operation. We are just returning the image. We are not really returning the thumbnail, but just the image at the moment. But the point is we have this completion handler way of writing the asynchronous method. Now, if you see the version of it, which is what we have been using so far, I will actually go to the very first code of R, which is this. Coming back to our continuation example file, and I'm gonna paste it here. So we're gonna get some redeclaration error because we're redeclaring all of this. So I'll just comment it, and we can see this one is the, I guess I can just mark this as version of fetch thumbnail method. So we can name it async await, but since it's using completion handler, so I'll just add it with completion in the name of it. Now I will ask you to just ignore these errors at the moment. It's just for reference. We know that this is the async await version of it. We use the async keyword in front of it and the await keyword whenever we make call to this method. We have the four operations in it that we have been looking thoroughly. We understood everything about it in previous videos. Just like that, other than these two way of writing asynchronous method, we have the delegate version. So we have here the thumbnail fetcher delegate, two methods which we are going to call in case it's a success or failure. If it's a failure, we call fail fetch, fetching thumbnail, or did fetch thumbnail when we have the image when the API call was successful. So here we have the first operation, prepare the URL, and in here we have the URL session share.data task, the legacy method, legacy asynchronous method, and we are having here a completion handler. It's a delegate version of our method because we do not have any completion handler here, right? This is our method and we do not have any completion handler here. The URL session data task will have the completion handler, and this is also a synchronous method, and this is also a synchronous method. We just have a asynchronous method inside one. So this is just for reference. This is how a delegate version of it looks like. If it's a success, we use the delegate that we have created here to call the did fail fetching thumbnail. If it was a success, we call did fetch thumbnail and give it an image. Now, event-based callbacks are another way of writing the asynchronous code. In our method, we just have these two variable on success, on failure, which are the two events, which are possibilities for the API call to get into. Either it will success, it will fail, and we use them as a callback whenever if there is a failure, we just call on failure, pass it the error, custom error. If it's a success, we pass the image. So these are the four ways to write the asynchronous code. But the problem here is, since we are very familiar with the completion handler form of asynchronous method, I will write here the problem. The problem is when we have the async await version of it, which is a very good, it's compact code, it's the most evolved concept, and this is the latest concept which actually reduces our code down to just four operations and operations using just barely two lines of code, right? So this is the best. So why cannot we have the async await version of all the methods that the SDK provides? Problem is the SDK provides thousands of asynchronous methods, and it's not possible for us to create the async await version of it from scratch, writing all the operations from scratch. And I will mention the problem very clearly first here. Legacy asynchronous method, and we have the modern asynchronous method that is using async await. The name of the method is data. So URL session.share.data task with request is actually the legacy API. And when we say URL session shared, dot data is the modern API. Now, this is a problem. Now, the solution that comes to mind is write modern or async await version of all um, legacy methods, asynchronous methods. Although the Apple engineers have written the data method, the modern API for the data task, we can do the same for the other method that the SDK provides, but it's not feasible, it's not safe, and we're not sure what all content it would be there in the legacy methods. And we have to write a lot of code. So Apple came with a solution that use continuation is the concept that we use to actually uh, have our legacy method as it is. We just use it to call inside a new function to which we will mark async. So what we are doing is we are just integrating the legacy API code with the new concept, and then we can use the async await version of it going forward. But the general solution that comes to mind is write the async await version of all the legacy API methods from scratch. But this solution in itself is a problem. So the best solution is use continuation to integrate legacy method with async await. Now let's understand how can we do it. So let's copy this completion handler, the legacy version, bring it to our, let's create a new file, continuation, and that's it. So I will just keep this old legacy code for reference here, and we will convert or basically make use of it, not really convert, but make use of it to wrap it around the async await code. And I would just go back to our very first example, that is the content view, and I will copy this much code along with the preview just to display the output, the image. So we are using the fetch thumbnail, which is the async await version, asynchronous method, and I will bring it here. Okay, so let's tackle the problem here, invalid redeclaration of the content view. So I will name it continuation content view. Let's open a Canva. See this if it's working all good. So it says fetching thumbnail, and then it shows the thumbnail. So our this much code, all of our code is working fine. Now I will just rephrase the problem. That is, what if we never have returned the fetch thumbnail, the async? I will copy this continuation, bring it here. So make it bigger. So these are the two ways we have. So suppose we have thousands of methods which is available in the legacy way, that is using completion handler. We actually wrote the async await version of the fetch thumbnail, and we actually wrote this method in previous videos. But what if this is not the solution? This is not the solution that we create the async await version of all the legacy asynchronous method from scratch. We need to take advantage of the code already written, the legacy API code. So how do we create, how do we use it? How do we not use it and just use this existing code? So what I would do is create a function fetch thumbnail version 2, I will name it, and I will just make the async, I'll just make it async. And inside that, what we're going to do is just copy the whole function and just paste it straightforward in here. Now, since we are going to have the new name, we will not require this. So let's remove it. And let's remove the parameters as well, because we'll be asking for the parameter from here now. So I will just copy this much first, the first parameter, paste it here. And we don't need the completion handler for our async method. So let's remove the whole of it. And this bracket as well from here and from here. And this is how what it looks like. We do not have the completion handler, but we are still calling. And that is the problem. To tackle that, we will write here continuation. And you would see we have checked continuation, and we have a lot many other continuation. But there are two main, that is checked continuation and with checked throwing continuation. So we're going to use this and understand what continuation is in terms of the concept, and we can explore the other continuations later. So I will press enter and I will just name it continuation. And inside that, we'll put all of it. And since this is the first operation, which is a synchronous operation, we have seen this with the help of diagram and all, I will put it outside. And this is our asynchronous operation, and everything else is all fine. Now we need to just tackle the completion. Now instead of completion, we will use the continuation dot resume. So right now we are seeing what we are doing. Later we'll see why we are doing. And in resume, if there is an error, we can pass the error as well. So we can say throwing E means the error. So I will just pass error to it. And this is fixed. Coming to the second completion, again we will use continuation dot resume, and here again we need to throw. So we'll throw the error straightforward. We are supposed to be throwing the fetch error, the customer error, so let's put it that way. Bad ID, some random bad ID. Here it should be invalid URL, some sort of custom error. And here we will put this one. So we'll say continuation not resume, and it's not returning, it's throwing this error. And once we have our image, I will say continuation dot resume returning image, which is this image. And since we are returning the image using the continuation, we need to mark it here in the return type as UI image. And we are using with checked throwing continuation because we are afraid that the code inside it may throw. So we are just using with checked throwing continuation. If we are absolutely sure the code inside will not throw, we can use with checked continuation. Now we have one more thing to tackle. It says generic parameter t could not be inferred. Since it is asynchronous method, so I will have to use await and it might throw. So I will have to use try. So I will just put return here. Okay. And when the error is thrown from here is not handled, so we have to mark our fetch thumbnail version 2 as throws. And that's it. These are the few steps that we follow to make the old code take advantage of that code and make the modern asynchronous method using async await. So we are free to use it now. We just can copy this and use it anywhere in our code and take advantage of the legacy API as well. So here we are calling some asynchronous method, that is the fetch thumbnail. The async await, something that we created from scratch, is this method. This method is right here. This is something we created from scratch. We did not take advantage of the already code written. This one we use continuation to take advantage of that already written code, and SDK provides a lot of thousands of legacy asynchronous code. We can take advantage of it like this, and we can now use just the way we have been using the async await. Since now this is the async await version of our legacy code, we can copy this and I will just replace it here, and this parameter would be same, and you would see it's fetching and it's showing the image. And that is how we take advantage of the legacy APIs. And doesn't matter how our code is written, using completion handler, delegate callbacks, we can just with a few steps write the async await version of it. And we know how to use the async await method. We just have to use await keyword to call it, and just to point out where all we use await keyword is basically to point out where the thread will suspend, and the async function is there, the async keyword is there. If this gets suspended, the caller of it also will get suspended. We have seen the meaning of these two keywords very much in detail in previous videos. And for this video, I think this is all there is to understand about continuation. If we are sure we are not throwing anything, we can just remove this keyword. If the code inside this is not going to throw, then we can just use it. We have other continuation, that is, we have unsafe continuation, unsafe throwing continuation. So these are the few variations of it, is what the Apple engineers has provided us. We'll undo this, and if you need the any sort of revision, just come to this file and you'll be okay with the steps. Once you know the steps, it's very easy to just convert the legacy API into the async await version of it. And that's it. Also, SDK actually provides a lot of many legacy methods, legacy asynchronous methods, just like data tasks we just saw. We have some of these examples here. MK directions, calculate ETA method, HK health store save method, and NS document share method, which are all using the completion handlers to handle the callback. And this is the asynchronous function, which once completed, it notifies the thread notifies by calling the completion handler as a callback. Now we know the async await, the modern version of it, that is the data method. So it's a async form of it, the async version of it, and we have been using this a lot. We also saw how to convert the legacy API into the modern API with a couple of steps using the continuation. We can do the same for these as well, although the Apple engineers has already done that. So out of the hundreds, they provide some of the methods converted using the continuation. So we can just go ahead and use it. And if there are any asynchronous legacy API methods, we can just follow the step, use the continuation, and just utilize that code and just wrap it into the async await version of it, or async await method. And this is all there is to talk about. I hope you find this video informative, and I'll connect with you.